Hey there, Horse Center fans. Matt and I are back with another exciting edition of the show, Matt. How about some equal time for the ladies?
Brian, you and I know that there is nothing more important than giving equal time to the females. So let's beat everybody to the punch with our annual early Kentucky Oaks show.
All right, Matt and I are running down our current top contenders for the Lilies. May 1 this year, Matt. Let's do it. Kentucky Oaks rundown right now on Horse Center. Welcome to another edition of Horse Center, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I have the terrific pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. That's Matt Shipman. How are you today, Matt?
I am very good, Brian. I feel like for this show I need a little break from the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, we're not talking Kentucky Derby today, folks. We are talking Kentucky Oaks, Matt. And that reminds me, didn't you get the memo to wear pink today?
I did, Brian, but I don't have a pink fleece. So if you had sent me one, I would have been happy to wear it.
Next year, I'll make sure to get you the pink fleece in the mail, Matt. Let's get to the Kentucky Oaks. The first look at the Kentucky Oaks, folks. We are going to run down our current top contenders. There are a lot of exciting young fillies on this list, Matt. So without further ado, let's jump right in. The first filly we need to talk about is a filly that in a short amount of time, a little over a week, she will be named the 2-year-old champion filly of 2019. Of course, I'm speaking of British Idiom, daughter of Flashback out of the Brad Cox barn.
Absolutely, Brian. She has done basically nothing wrong on the racetrack. 3 races, 3 wins, a maiden special weight, the Alcibiades, the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, 2 grade 1s in there. Pretty darn good resume.
You know, one thing I like about this filly, Matt, now granted, Flashback has not been has not set the world on fire as a sire yet, but maybe this is the start of it. But she was purchased as a yearling for only $40,000. Another thing I like about British Idiom, Matt, is that she's done it in New York, she's done it in Kentucky, and she's done it in California already. You said she's 3 for 3, but she's been all those places. She's powered by in some of her wins. Although in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, it was not an easy run down the stretch that time. So what are we to take from that? It was enough to win a championship, but does that show maybe a chink in the armor of the number 1 filly on our list?
I don't know, Brian. If that's the case, it's a very, very small chink in the armor at this point. But, you know, moving on to 3-year-old, the maturity of others, we'll have to see when she comes back and makes her first start.
Absolutely. Now, of course, in the race before the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, one of the reasons she was the horse to beat out there in California in the Breeders' Cup was a fantastic win at Keeneland. She just blew by the field, looked like a champion that she's about to come. Matt, she's working already this year. She just got back on the work tab down in New Orleans. She's at Fairgrounds, and we're expecting a first race from her in less than a month. We're talking about the Rachel Alexander there at the Fairgrounds, 3 for 3. I am going to say this about her, Matt. It's possible. And her trainer, Brad Cox, has done so much in a short amount of time recently, but it's possible that she's not even the best 3-year-old filly in that barn. Do you believe me?
I believe everything you say, Brian, when it comes to the Kentucky Oaks, because you're an expert.
Well, that's your first mistake, I guess. All right, Matt, enough about British Idiom. We congratulate her. Matt and I here at Horse Center congratulate her on her upcoming announcement of being the 2-year-old filly champion. The next horse on our Kentucky Oaks list, Matt, is not a champion. In fact, she didn't race as a 2-year-old, so no chance for her to be a champion, although she was kind of a champion in the sales ring, Matt, because Spice is Nice, daughter of Curlin, sold for just over $1 million.
I tell you what, Brian, if you're going to spend $1 million on a racehorse, then the kind of results that they got in that first race at Gulfstream Park when she broke her maiden by 12 lengths, that's what you want to see. Of course, along with the kind of pedigree that that horse has out of by Curlin on the sire side, and on the female side, her mother is Dame Dorothy, who was a heck of a runner on her own, Grade 1 winner, I think around $750,000 in her career, I think 7 wins out of 12 starts, trained by Todd Pletcher, owned by Bobby Flay. Spice is Nice is trained by Todd Pletcher, was bred by Bobby Flay, who sold the horse in the auction. And the name Spice is Nice is a little homage to Mr. Flay by the current owners, the Lowe's out in California.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. She looked like a 7-figure filly when she debuted recently at Gulfstream Park. Big, strong daughter of Curlin. She looked the part in that race. She just shot up the rail, took the race over. It looked like it was as easy as could be, and then she just poured it on down the stretch. It was a 1-mile debut too, so they're not bringing her out in sprints. This looks like a legitimate filly mile at Gulfstream there in 136 flat, and it was easy, good-looking filly. I can see why she sold for $1 million with that breeding and the looks, and then she put it together in her debut performance. We're expecting her to stay down in South Florida for a little while. We'll probably see a graded stakes in her second start. As you said, trained by Todd Pletcher. Spice is Nice. It looks like the sky is the limit for this filly, who's only run once so far. The next horse on our list has run quite a bit more than once, Matt. In fact, British Idiom, we already gave her the 2-year-old filly championship as an Eclipse Award winner, about to be an Eclipse Award winner. But you could argue that no horse on our list here is more accomplished than the daughter of Uncle Mo. I'm speaking of Bast, Matt. She's trained by Bob Baffert, and she already has 4 graded stakes wins.
Yeah, Brian, a pretty extensive resume for a young horse these days, with 6 starts, 4 wins, a second and a third. You mentioned the graded stakes victories. 3 of them, Brian, are grade 1s. That's more than British Idiom has. And looking at some of the ballots that Eclipse Award voters posted, I actually saw some people who did vote for Bast as the top 2-year-old filly based on that. A grade 2 in there, was 3rd in the Breeders' Cup. Uncle Mo has had a terrific year.
Yeah, Uncle Mo has proven to be an excellent sire, and it started a few years ago. And he's, Matt, one of 3 sires on this list of Kentucky Oaks top contenders here on Horse Center. He's one of 3 sires with 2 horses on the list. I wonder, I don't mean to put down Bellafina, because she's a wonderful, now a 4-year-old filly. But Bast reminds me a little bit of Bellafina, kind of the cream of the crop out in California so far, just racking up stakes wins. Of course, we knew Bellafina couldn't quite beat the best as she left California. She ran a very good race in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. But I wonder if Bast is this year's version of Bellafina, or if she'll be able to take the show on the road. She did get beat in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile fillies, and that included British Idiom, as we also already mentioned, but also Donna Veloce. And if you look since then, though, Bast has come back with 2 nice wins, beating Donna Veloce to end last year. And one of those graded stakes wins, Matt, already came this year in the Santa Ynez. So Bast, like Spice is Nice, already has good form in 2020 in her 3-year-old season. And certainly the Queen of California at this point, also another one that they spent some money for. This Bob Baffert training, Matt, was a $500,000 purchase as a yearling. Speaking of fillies with high expectations, I've been hearing more and more about Taraz lately, Matt. She is a Juddmonte, a homebred. That's generally regal breeding. This daughter of Into Mischief is no different. This one went to Brad Cox. Brad Cox training a well-liked Juddmonte filly match. She's 2 for 2 already in her career, and she looks like the real deal.
Yeah, Brian, we talked about Brad Cox. This is the second Brad Cox training, I think, of 3 that we have on our list. And like you said, Juddmonte means that they've got some pretty darn good brood mares, and they have been spreading their well-bred, talented horses around a little bit. And Into Mischief, 2 for 2, a maiden special weight victory at Churchill Downs, which we always like to see, getting a win on the Kentucky Oaks track already. And then she registered a win in a non-graded stake at the fairgrounds.
Yeah, she did both of those things for sure, Matt. The debut performance at Churchill came going 6.5 furlongs back in November. And then the stakes win at Fairgrounds was 6 furlongs, both sharp times. The second one, that stakes race in New Orleans, she won by 11. It looks like they will be stretching her out a little bit. She's penciled in, keeping her separate from British Idiom a little bit. She's penciled in to run next at Oaklawn Park in the 1 mile Martha Washington, which will be coming the 1st of February. So Taraz really recently has become one of the most talked about 2-year-old fillies, and certainly extremely high on the potential scale. Matt, we're gonna stick with that high on the potential scale. I like this list of fillies because the next one on our list is a daughter of Tappet. She's in the Bill Mott barn, and Lake Avenue looked awfully good in her last 2 starts at Aqueduct.
Yes, and again, this one's from Godolphin. So if we're going down the list here, and we got big name connections at royally bred horses on this list. Lake Avenue was a maiden winner at Aqueduct and came back and won the Demoiselle, a grade 2 at Aqueduct. Lake Avenue is the name, and for those of you that go to Saratoga in the summer, you know that's one of the streets right by the racetrack.
Yeah, so we talked about how much Spice is Nice cost and a little bit about Bast. Taraz and now Lake Avenue are both homebreds out of these big operations with royal breeding. So either of these, if they had sold at auction, I think they would have gone for a pretty penny as well. Lake Avenue was a good second in her debut at Belmont. Then she turned it on at Aqueduct. She won her maiden by a pole. And then she came right back in the Demoiselle mount, which is 9 furlongs. So she's already been the Kentucky Oaks distance. She won the Kentucky Oaks nicely by about 4 lengths over some good fillies. In fact, some fillies we have on this list. So the daughter at Tappet, Lake Avenue, trained by Bill Mott, will be one to watch when she comes back a little bit later in the year. All right, Matt, the next on the list, we've already mentioned her, and it's really an interesting past performance chart on Donna Veloce, another daughter of Uncle Mo, this one trained by Simon Callahan, because she was an $800,000 2-year-old in training purchase. She looked the part in just romping in her debut, and then they threw her right into the big-time races, right into the Wolves, and she performed pretty well.
Yeah, she did. She's got a couple of second place finishes in there, but I would not call those blemishes. She was second in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, and then, as we mentioned, she was second in the Starlet behind Bast. Again, talk about impressive connections. Donna Veloce is owned by Kaleem Shah, who we know has had many really good horses out in California in partnership with, again, wait for it, Coolmore gang, about the only super big group that we haven't mentioned.
Yeah, she reminds me a little bit of the Colt, Anneau Dior, in her form, in that she went from a maiden and quickly went right into the Breeders' Cup. And I tell you, I think that Breeders' Cup shows how classy Donna Veloce is or could be. Now, British Idiom did beat her that day, but coming out of quickly back from a sprint debut maiden race, and to run that bang-up race in the Breeders' Cup, again, ahead of Bast and the rest, really big performance. Now, the Los Al, it was a wet track, and she could never get by Bast. So there are questions about winning these battles, but especially the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. I think Donna Veloce showed that she is kind of a real deal as well. So we're waiting for her to come back out in California again for trainer Simon Callahan. We're going to stick with the California fillies for now, Matt. We're about halfway done with this list, but I don't think there's anybody on this list who has a higher speed figure than the daughter of Munnings. Her name is Venetian Harbor.
Yes, she put a whooping on field of maiden special weights at Santa Anita, going 6.5 furlongs when she took off and won that race by 10 lengths. She's by Munnings, maybe not one of the big name sires, but is turning out some good horses as of late, and is trained by Richard Baltus, who is a West Coast trainer who is becoming and moving up my list of favorite trainers in the West.
Yeah, Richard Baltus, no doubt, is doing well of late, and Venetian Harbor looks like in her he could have any kind. Venetian Harbor was a good second in her debut performance, but then she turned the corner in her second race, Matt, which, as you mentioned, was a maiden special weight, where she won by just about 11 lengths. Really fast time, was 1:15 and change for the 6.5 furlongs. And like I mentioned, she got a big figure for that performance. So Venetian Harbor has quickly become one of the horses that everybody's talking about among these young fillies. So we'll watch out for her in California as well. Speaking of the sire Munnings, Matt, we're going to go back-to-back Munnings, the second sire on the list with 2 horses. By the way, the other one is Tappet. We're going to get to another Tappet soon, but while several of these fillies are lightly raced, the next filly is a little bit more experienced. She comes from the Steve Asmussen barn. This daughter of Munnings' name is Finite, Matt, and she's running this weekend.
Yeah, and again, great connections. Hall of Famer Steve Asmussen, and owned by the Winchells, who have had an awful lot of great horses, fillies and colts on both sides. Asmussen has run this horse a good bit, but it's the last 3 races. She's won 3 in a row, including the Goldenrod, which is a grade 1 at Churchill Downs.
Matt, I like her past performances. I really do, because there's a lot of I called her experienced, and you know, nowadays 5 races as a 2-year-old is experienced, but there was a lot in there if you look at it. She came out at Saratoga and she ran 2 good second place finishes sprinting at Saratoga. And then she went a little bit off the grid, if you will, because she went to Kentucky Downs and ran on their unique turf course there. So she's already a winner on turf for trainer Steve Asmussen. And once she got that under her belt, they brought her to Churchill Downs, of course, the host of the Kentucky Oaks, the race we're talking about, the ultimate goal here in a little over 100 days for all these fillies. And she won back-to-back stakes there, winning the Rags to Riches and then the Goldenrod. So really good experience. She's running this weekend. It's the Silver Bullet Day down in Fairgrounds. She's facing a pretty good field down there, but she'll be the favorite off, especially the way she finished off last year. All right, Matt. So that was back-to-back Munnings. Let's jump back to another Tappet. There's not enough Tappets in our life, Matt. I guess she's the 9th horse on our list, and she's coming off a loss. One of the few fillies on our list who's coming off a loss. But Maedean, I remember Breeders' Cup weekend. You know, I was focusing on the Breeders' Cup, and you said you better take a look at this Tempted winner. Her name is Maedean. She's trained by Mark Hennig.
Yep, but it's another one of those Tappets in there, and that Breeders' Cup weekend that you mentioned, she moved up to the Tempted, which is a Kentucky Oaks points race, and won that one in flashy style by 5 lengths. Went from that to, as you mentioned before, the 1 1/8 in the Demoiselle, where she was defeated by Lake Avenue, who we talked about earlier. So, yeah, that's a loss, but that's not a real negative loss, considering how much we think of Lake Avenue.
Yeah, so Maedean is a $450,000 yearling purchase, another expensive filly. And after her debut performance, her second race was a nice win in New York. She's only run in New York so far for Mark Hennig. But then the maiden win was really nice. She caught your eye when she won that tempted, just romping away in the stretch from the rest in there. And then in the Demoiselle, it was 9 furlongs. Lake Avenue kind of controlled the race with her tactical speed, and Maedean, I should say, is more of a rallier, and she did rally up nicely at 9 furlongs. There's something I like about that, where these 2-year-old fillies to rally at 9 furlongs, number one, and to rally against quality competition. She got up and beat another pretty good filly for second that day. So she looks like a filly who's going to like a distance. And maybe if we look into her crystal ball a little bit, Matt, there's usually some speed to talk about in the Kentucky Oaks, and she may be one already that we know that can run down horses at a distance. So that's number 9 on our list, Maedean. Now we're going to get into some horses, Matt, who made splashes at 2. They may not be quite as high on our list, but they're horses we should keep an eye on at least. During the summer at Saratoga, I don't think she ever got much credit, but the best 2-year-old filly at Saratoga last summer was trained by Mark Casse, daughter of Sky Mazer. Her name is Perfect Alibi.
Yeah, when you say Mark Casse, that usually means that you're going to get a horse with experience, and that's what we've got in Perfect Alibi. 6 starts, 3 wins, 2 seconds. It's the formidable. It's another formidable team. It's Casse and Tracy Farmer, who in the past has won so many big races at that time for other trainers. And as you said, at Saratoga, won the Grade 1 Spinaway. That wasn't time to rest, not for a Casse horse. Came back and ran second in the Alcibiades down in Kentucky, and kept going out to California for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, where she was 4th. And we remember that racetrack out there was very deep and a little bit different. And for a horse that was running at Saratoga, that Santa Anita surface may not have been to her liking, but a lot of good things on that resume.
Yeah, a lot of good things on the resume for sure, Matt. 2 graded stakes wins at Saratoga. That's something. I also noticed in those two wins at Saratoga, she was able to work her way through horses, find the opening when she needed to, come up the rail if she had to. So she's obviously a horse who kind of knows what she's doing as a racehorse already and likes to win. We did see the Alcibiades replay here already on our Kentucky Oaks preview show, and she was no match that day for British Idiom, but that was her first stretch out to a distance. Really, 4 horses were anywhere near the winner in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, so she was only one of 4 horses that really ran a lick that day in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. And you're right, California, Santa Anita that day might not have been at her favorite type of surface. She's run well in Kentucky already, and she deserves a spot on this list with those grade 6 wins, especially at Saratoga, and 6 lifetime starts already. The next one on our list, Matt, comes from another trainer that we both definitely like quite a bit. I'm talking about Graham Motion. I guess Blame Dabby is one of the least known fillies on this list, but I think she's one that could develop. You know how I like Sons and Daughters of Blame. She's only had 3 starts, and I would think that she might be a filly who could get better with that breeding and the barn she's in.
Yeah, that's for sure. And you and I both like Blame on the racetrack as a runner and as a sire. And she ran 3rd in that pretty darn good field in the Demoiselle, considering that we've already talked about the winner and the second place horse, and she gets all the credit that the others got in that she's gone 1 1/8 miles already on the Aqueduct track, and as you described that race, Lake Avenue just took control of it, and that Aqueduct track, which can be deep and slow, isn't an easy racetrack to close on a horse that is taking charge on the front end.
Yeah, good point, Matt. And Blame Debbie looked like a very nice young filly when she broke her maiden in her second start out my way in Keeneland before that. And the Demoiselle was her third start, 9 furlongs. She accounted herself well, just getting caught late, beat late for second by Maedean. So Blame Debbie deserves a spot on this list. But again, I think she might be one that is eligible to get better at 3. She's been working first at Fair Hill and most recently at Tampa Bay Downs. So we should look for Blame Debbie to make her three-year-old debut pretty soon. Another one who will be making her 3-year-old debut very soon is the 12th filly on our list, Matt. We have a dozen here, and that's Portrait. Portrait also, number 3. You mentioned it earlier, number 3 from the barn of Brad Cox. If Brad Cox doesn't watch out, he's going to be known as the master of training fillies with all his success in recent years. This one is a daughter of Tapizar, Matt. A little disappointing, actually, last time. She was the favorite in the Pocahontas in her final race at 2. She finished 3rd, didn't get beat bad by any stretch, but after her romping win in her second start, I think people thought that Portrait could be a good one.
Yeah, and she's not a Tappet. She's by Tapizar, so I guess maybe Tappet gets a half point on this one. Again, very strong connections. Brad Cox, LJN Foxwoods is the owner in there, and in watching that race, I thought that Portrait showed a little bit of immaturity in there. Raced down the stretch a little bit greenly in there. And I guess that's not to be too much of a surprise with a little bit of Tappet blood in there. So we'll have to see how this one develops as a 3-year-old.
That's right, man. She did show her potential. She flashed some serious potential in that maiden romp at Ellis Park. Hey, Brad Cox has had some success with Daughters of Tapizar. Not too far back, of course. I'm speaking of a champion a couple years ago, Monomoy Girl. Portrait will get the chance to show if she's moving forward like we think she may, because she is listed as the second choice in Saturday's Silver Bullet Day, topped by Finite, but Portrait is the second choice in there. And again, that's Saturday at Fairgrounds. So we'll know more about both of them in the next few days. And Matt, what's a dozen for the Kentucky Oaks this time of year without one more? Let's call it a baker's dozen, will you? I just wanted to include the 13th horse on our list because she looks so darn good at both Saratoga and Belmont. I'm speaking of Wicked Whisper, daughter of Liam's Map, who really kind of threw in a clunker in the Breeders' Cup.
Yeah, again, like we can give her a pass for those reasons that we talked about, making the transition from the New York tracks to what was going on at Santa Anita at the time. But you mentioned her maiden win at Saratoga, which came by 6 lengths, and then she backed that up with a win in the Frizette Grade 1. Racing on the front end and winning by 2 lengths. It's Steve Asmussen again with really good connections, owned by the LeBlancs.
$500,000 yearling, Matt, and as good as she looked at Saratoga and the Grade 1 Frizette, we're not going to forget about her here on Horse Center. Now, the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies did have a lot of speed in there, and she was making only her 3rd lifetime start, her first start around 2 turns, trying that Santa Anita surface with a lot of other speed in there. But she didn't run well. She never got to the lead, and she really backed out pretty badly in there. So we'll need to see more from Wicked Whisper. But those first 2 races were good enough to earn her a spot on this list because she really did look like a good thing. Daughter of Liam's Map. Liam's Map is another one of those super hot sires, and she's trained by Steve Asmussen. So we'll look for Wicked Whisper to bounce back from her disappointment in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. Wow, Matt, we ran down 13 pretty quickly here. I hope we didn't go too fast for you folks, but these are our top 3-year-old fillies right now, at least dirt fillies. We're talking Kentucky Oaks here on this week's edition of Horse Center, Matt, and I always enjoy talking about the fillies. Equal time for the ladies, Matt. It's not just Kentucky Derby. The Kentucky Oaks is a huge race. Everybody wants to win the Kentucky Oaks, and in these 13 fillies, we think we have a pretty good handle so far what's going on. Hey, Matt, can I get a parting shot? And if it's somewhat Oaks related, that wouldn't be a bad thing.
As you said, it was fun doing this Kentucky Oaks list. I think we gave you a good mix of the favorites and front runners, along with some horses that are less experienced, and also some horses that we should still keep an eye on, even though they didn't win their last race. We've got a lot of Kentucky Derby stuff coming up, I think, on next week's show. We'll be back on more of a regular schedule next week. And, of course, I want to thank our producer, Brett Workman, for putting together the show.
Yeah, we have some Pegasus World Cup to talk about, too, next week. So definitely tune in for next week's show right here on Horse Center. Folks, if you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel here on Horse Racing Nation, please do so. We appreciate you watching every week. We also appreciate our sponsor, the best contest site out there. That's Derby Wars. Thanks for watching the Kentucky Oaks. Watch these fillies as you watch the colts get ready for the Derby. Like I said, we're just over 100 days away now from those big races at Churchill Downs, the first Friday and the first Saturday in May. Folks, we'll see you right back here on another edition of Horse Center next week. See you then.